If you do this, he will beg you to come back, even if he's with someone else. You know when someone leaves you and seems to move on in the blink of an eye? It's not always a sign that they've stopped loving you. Often it's because you've become someone they don't even recognize anymore. Think of it not as a punishment, but as a signal. It's a sign that somewhere on your journey you lost a piece of yourself. You stepped away from that core essence that made you so magnetic and so whole, not just to them, but to the world. You see, love isn't a chase. It's not about begging someone to stay or trying to convince them of your worth. And it's certainly not about shrinking yourself to fit into the shape of their wounds. Real love is an alignment. It's an energetic truth. And sometimes the most powerful move you can make to help someone realize your true value is to stop doing anything at all. Stop the chase and start becoming everything you were meant to be all over again. There's a quiet force in this world, one that's more powerful, soul than the loudest shouts, and more magnetic than a perfect appearance. It's not something you can fake or manipulate, it's presence. And when you truly cultivate this presence, it has the power to reawaken something in others, long after you've walked out of their life. When a relationship ends, especially if your ex moves on like they have no regrets, it can feel like a storm is raging inside you. So many of us fall into that spiral, right? We start pleading, over-explaining endlessly, going over every little thing that went wrong. But here's the truth. What often draws a person back, or at the very least makes them question everything, isn't your explanation or your emotional pleas. It's the quiet stillness of your transformation. It's the new quality of your presence that they start to feel powerfully in your absence. Imagine a woman named Chloe. For over 7 years, she had poured every part of herself into her partner. She was always accommodating, always available, always stretching herself thin for him. So, when he left her for someone else, she was completely broken. But after that first wave of grief passed, something inside her started to shift. She stopped checking his social media. She stopped trying to prove that she was worthy of his love. Instead, she just started showing up for her own life. On the outside, nothing much changed, but internally, her entire world was being rewired. She started to walk a little slower. She spoke less and listened more. She learned to breathe deeper, to sit with her feelings instead of reacting to them. And slowly her nervous system, which had been on high alert for so long, began to settle. The chaos in her heart quieted down, replaced by a silence. And this wasn't the silence of giving up. It was the silence of a new, profound power. And people started to notice. Strangers in the grocery store would comment on her sense of calm. Old friends would ask, "Are you in love again?" But she wasn't. She was simply finally back home in herself. Now, let's talk about what's actually happening in your body when you do this. What Chloe did was regulate her nervous system. Presence isn't just some vague idea. It's a physical experience you can feel. When your parasympathetic nervous system is activated, that's the part responsible for rest, healing, and digestion. Your breath slows down, your heart rate becomes steady, and your entire energy feels more grounded. And other people can feel this. Haven't you ever sensed anxiety on someone without them saying a word? In the same way we can sense stability and calm. In relationships, this grounded energy is incredibly attractive, especially when compared to the frantic, desperate energy of someone who is pleading for love. And here's the biggest irony of all. The very act of no longer trying to get someone back is often the one thing that makes them reconsider leaving you. This isn't some trick or tactic. It's a deep truth about human psychology and energy. When you reclaim your presence, you stop being reactive and you start being magnetic. You shift from chasing them to attracting them. You stop trying to convince them of your worth, and instead you allow them to feel the void that your new calm presence has created in their world. Eastern philosophy has taught for centuries that the one who holds the stillness holds the power of the mountain. In Taoism, there's a saying, "Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished." When our hearts are broken, we feel this desperate urge to hurry to fix things, to win them back before they can forget us. But that's just the ego talking. Your soul knows that time isn't the enemy. In fact, time when you meet it with presence becomes your greatest ally. It gives other people the space to feel the full echo of your absence. But here's something you might not expect. Presence isn't about just appearing calm on the outside or putting on a mask of self-control. It's about deep, honest connection with yourself. If you feel angry, you sit with that anger. You don't project it onto others. You hold it, you witness it, you breathe through it. If you're grieving, you don't push that grief down. You give it the space it needs to move through your body, to flow, and to be released. When you do this, your inner world and your outer world start to align. You're no longer faking peace. You're actively cultivating it. And this alignment is what people feel when they say, "There's something different about you." They can't quite put their finger on it, but they can sense it. This is the very beginning of true self-mastery. In one of his teachings, Master Shi Heng Yi talks about the power of standing meditation. Picture a person standing completely still for 30 minutes. No movement, no distractions, just their breath and their awareness. What starts as discomfort slowly becomes a powerful lesson in observing the mind detaching from urges and tapping into a much deeper layer of strength. This is what cultivating presence trains you for, not just in meditation, but in life. When your ex sees you not reacting, not performing for an audience, not desperately trying to be seen, they begin to feel their own internal conflict. Your silence starts to reflect their noise. Your peace becomes a stark contrast to their own unresolved chaos. This is why returning to your presence is so powerful. It's not about punishing them. It's about becoming a mirror that shows them their own impulsive decisions or emotional immaturity. So many people leave relationships looking for something new and exciting, but what they often find is just surface-level stimulation. And when their nervous system eventually starts craving that calm, grounding connection, you once provided a connection that is now amplified by your newfound presence, they begin to long for something much deeper. And that longing isn't for the person you used to be, it's for the person you have become. Now let's move to the second key point, emotional detachment. This might sound cold, but it's actually an act of the highest emotional maturity. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop loving someone. It means you stop needing them to act a certain way for you to feel at peace. You shift from a conditional love to a compassionate awareness. You move from attachment to freedom. Let's go back to Chloe. Months into her journey of self-discovery, her ex reached out. He was hesitant, a little distant, but very curious. "You seem different," he said. "I just wanted to check in." The old version of Chloe would have jumped at this chance right. She would have poured her heart out trying to show him how much she had grown. But the new Chloe, the present Chloe, simply replied, "I hope you're doing well." There was no hidden agenda, no subtle game to try and hook him back in. It was a statement of peace, not a performance. And that moment wasn't about getting him back. It was about her feeling the fullness of her own detachment. Her heart still remembered the love, of course, but her well-being no longer depended on his validation. This is what true healing looks like. It's when you no longer need closure from someone else because you have already given it to yourself. In psychology, this is called secure attachment. It's the ability to stay emotionally open while also being completely grounded in your own self-trust. It's the antidote to that anxious clinging or that avoidant pulling away. And it's cultivated not just with time, but with daily emotional hygiene. Practices like journaling, doing body scans, intentional breathing, and setting healthy boundaries are all tools that retrain your nervous system to find safety within yourself. The more emotionally safe you feel inside, the less you'll grasp for it from other people. In relationship, this detachment creates a powerful shift. When someone realizes they no longer have emotional control over you, when they feel that you are genuinely unaffected by their silence, their new relationship, or their indecisiveness, they are faced with the full weight of their own choices. They no longer see you as someone who depends on them, but as someone who is sovereign, and that sovereignty is deeply attractive. Not because it's mysterious, but because it reflects the one thing most people desperately crave, but rarely find: stability. Detachment also allows you to see things much more clearly. When we are emotionally entangled, we see everything through a lens of either hope or fear. Every text message becomes a secret sign. Every silence becomes a looming threat. But when you detach, you start to see things as they truly are, not as you wish they were. And in that clarity, you often realize something critical. The person they left wasn't the real you. It was a version of you that had forgotten her own worth in the desperate effort to hold on to them. Detachment is also spiritual. In Zen Buddhism, the concept of non-attachment teaches that everything in life is temporary. True freedom is the ability to love someone fully without clinging to them. When you can honestly say, "I love you," and "I release you," you are no longer in a transactional relationship. You are in a transformational one, even if that relationship has ended. Consider the story of a man named Liam. He had broken up with his partner of 5 years, Maya, and jumped right into a new relationship. Maya was devastated, but instead of trying to win him back, She started to work on herself physically, emotionally, and spiritually. She spent time alone in nature. She joined a breathwork group. She started writing again, something she had long forgotten. Months later, Liam called her out of the blue, confessing that he'd made a huge mistake. "You feel different," he said, "more grounded. I don't know why, but I miss that." Maya just listened. She didn't say much. She simply thanked him for his honesty and wished him peace. That conversation wasn't about getting back together. It was about her confirming to herself just how far she had come. Because true detachment allows you to meet someone from your past, not with longing, but with neutrality. And from that neutral place, you are finally free to choose, not just react. This is the great paradox of healing. When you no longer need them, that's often when they come back. Not because of a game you played, but because the entire energetic dynamic between you has shifted. You are no longer signaling a feeling of lack. You are signaling inner abundance. And that is what the human heart, consciously or not, always recognizes. From a neuroscience perspective, emotional detachment activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking, self-awareness, and emotional regulation. When we're emotionally enmeshed, we operate from our limbic system, our emotional brain, which is impulsive, reactive, and driven by fear. By practicing detachment, we create the space to move from pure reaction to thoughtful reflection. This neurological shift is what gives us the clarity to act from a place of wisdom, not from our wounds. In this space of wisdom, we rediscover something sacred, our inner ground, that place inside of us that can't be taken, abandoned, or forgotten by anyone. And when this ground becomes stable, we no longer chase or beg. We no longer twist ourselves into pretzels to fit someone else's desires, especially someone who couldn't see our worth the first time. Instead, we become the mountain steady, present, and detached. And from this powerful place, we either attract back what is truly meant for us, or we make space for something even better. There is a kind of power that very few people truly understand. It doesn't come from a job title, from money, or even from being physically attractive. It is the strength of emotional discipline, your ability to master your inner world, no matter what is happening on the outside. Most people are completely ruled by their emotions. They react, they spiral, they get tangled up in endless cycles of blame and pain. But the person who is emotionally disciplined stands like a tree in a hurricane. They feel the wind. They might even sway, but their roots hold firm. They do not break. Emotional discipline is not about suppressing your feelings. It's not about denying what you feel. It's about developing the wisdom to choose your response instead of being hijacked by your initial reaction. In relationships, especially after love has turned to loss, this becomes absolutely critical. Because when someone walks away, when they replace you or seem to forget you overnight, you are left with a raw vulnerability that can completely consume you if you let it. Take the story of Olivia. Her 9-year relationship ended out of nowhere. Her partner found someone new within a matter of weeks. She was completely shattered. For a while, every waking moment was filled with that inner noise. What did I do wrong? How could he move on so fast? Was any of it ever real? But then something remarkable happened. Instead of numbing her pain with distractions or seeking comfort by jumping into a new relationship, Olivia did something very few people have the courage to do. She turned inward. She started practicing mindful breathing every single morning. She wrote down all her thoughts with complete brutal honesty in a journal. And when the waves of grief came crashing down, because they always do, she didn't fight them. She met them with presence. This is the very core of emotional discipline, to feel everything deeply, but not to drown in it. To observe your pain without becoming your pain. Neuroscience backs this up. Research shows that when we practice mindfulness, when we bring a gentle, non-judgmental attention to our thoughts and feelings, we actually decrease activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center. At the same time, we increase activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part that governs self-regulation and higher reasoning. You see, heartbreak triggers a survival response in your brain. It's not just emotional, it's physiological. Your body literally perceives that rejection as a threat to your survival. But when you breathe deeply, when you anchor your attention in your body, you send a new signal to your nervous system, a signal that says you are safe. And once the body feels safe, the mind will follow. Olivia started to embody this safety. She didn't chase her ex. She didn't try to win the breakup by posting fake happy pictures online. She simply stayed committed to her own healing. And as she did, her entire energy began to change. People at work noticed it. Strangers started smiling at her more often. She began to radiate a quiet confidence, one that was born not from being perfect, but from being self-contained. Her ex did eventually reach out, not with a big apology, but with a sense of confusion. "I keep thinking about you," he said. "But you feel different." Of course she did. She had stopped being the version of herself who clung to him, who cried out to be seen. She had become someone who saw herself clearly, even through the fog of her own pain. This is the kind of transformation that emotional discipline makes possible. It allows you to grow in the face of pressure instead of shrinking. In Eastern philosophy, this is often compared to the lotus flower, a beautiful flower that doesn't bloom in a perfect garden, but in muddy, murky water. It's a reminder that your suffering doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the very soil in which your deeper self takes root. And in practical terms, emotional discipline requires consistent effort. It's built through a series of small choices. The choice to pause before sending that angry emotional text. The choice to sit with your discomfort instead of immediately acting on it. The choice to respond to silence, not with panic, but with patience. These tiny decisions made over and over again literally rewire your brain. They create new neural pathways that favor calm over chaos and presence over panic. And there's another layer here that you have to understand. Emotional discipline gives you back your dignity. So often in heartbreak, we lose ourselves completely in the attempt to save the relationship. We send those late-night texts hoping for any response. We replay every conversation in our heads. We lower our standards just to feel needed again for a moment. But every time you abandon yourself to try and win someone back, you chip away at the very energy that made you so lovable in the first place. Instead, discipline invites you to honor your own boundaries, to walk away from disrespect, not because you don't care, but because you finally care enough about yourself. And this quiet strength, this dignity speaks so much louder than any plea ever could. Those who walked away from you may begin to feel it, not as a punishment, but as a mirror. Your steadiness exposes their impulsiveness, your clarity challenges their confusion, and your silence becomes louder than all of their noise. Now we arrive at the fourth teaching: elevating your self-worth through purpose. This isn't about pretending you're over someone. It's about realizing that your life was never meant to just orbit around one person. It's about understanding that the sun of your own being doesn't rise and set based on whether someone decides to stay or go. In the empty space left by a relationship, there is an opportunity, and in that space your true purpose can be discovered or reawakened. This doesn't always happen right away. Many people wake up after a breakup feeling completely lost with no direction, almost like they're invisible. But this is not the end. It is an invitation. Think of a woman named Zoe. After her divorce, she felt hollow. Her role as a wife and a partner had defined her for 2 decades. With that identity gone, she had no idea who she was anymore. But instead of rushing into another relationship to fill that void, she asked herself a powerful question. What is trying to emerge from this pain? She started exploring things she had once loved, but had forgotten about: painting, hiking, volunteering in her community. And slowly her life started to feel rich and textured again. She discovered a new passion for mentoring young girls in her neighborhood, teaching them about emotional resilience and self-respect. Her days became filled with a deep sense of meaning, and in doing so, she stopped waiting for her ex-husband to come back. Not because she no longer loved him, but because her own life had become so rich and beautiful in ways she had never even imagined. This is the essence of purpose. It becomes your anchor when everyone else around you is drifting. It lights a fire within you that doesn't need external attention to keep burning. And this inner light, this commitment to your own becoming, makes you radiant. People can feel it, including the very people who once took your light for granted. In the world of psychology, Viktor Frankl famously wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how." In the context of heartbreak, that why is crucial. Without a purpose, you will constantly seek meaning through the approval of the person who left you. But with a purpose, you become the author of your own meaning. You stop waiting for someone else to choose you. You start choosing yourself every single day deeply, and without apology. Purpose is also profoundly regulating for your nervous system. When we are aligned with something that feels bigger than ourselves, whether it's creativity, service to others, or our own personal growth, we can access what are known as flow states. These are those magical moments when the mind becomes quiet, the heart feels steady, and our sense of self expands. In these states, the grief from your loss becomes just a small part of the background instead of the entire picture. And as you begin to live from this place of purpose, your identity transforms. You are no longer just the one who was left behind. You become someone who is becoming. And this is deeply attractive because most people, if they're honest with themselves, are searching for that kind of depth. They are drawn to people who are rooted in something real. And even if your ex has moved on, the contrast between you anchored in your purpose and others who might be lost in surface-level things will become more and more evident over time. There's a wise Eastern saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, but sometimes your heartbreak is the teacher. And if you are willing to learn from it, it won't just break you. It will break you open to more clarity, open to your calling, open to a kind of self-respect that no longer wavers based on who gives you attention. This doesn't mean you become hard or indifferent. On the contrary, it means the love you have to give becomes purer. It's less transactional. You no longer give your love just to be validated. You give it because it flows from a place that is already full. And should someone from your past return to your life, they will no longer meet the old version of you, the one who was desperate to be chosen. They will meet the version of you who has already chosen herself. And if they don't return, you are still whole. You are still walking your own path, not as a victim of a lost love, but as a vessel of it. Because your purpose has given your pain a new direction. And that direction always leads inward first. Toward self-awareness, toward emotional mastery, toward a deeper and more profound connection with life itself. Of all the energies we carry, perhaps none is as quietly powerful as presence. I'm not talking about the kind of presence that demands attention through loudness or being flashy, but the kind of presence that can still an entire room, the kind that makes someone pause in the middle of a thought, the kind that speaks volumes before a single word is ever uttered. Presence is not about what you wear or how perfectly you act. It is who you are when you are fully there, fully yourself, and fully at peace within your own skin. In relationships, especially those marked by pain and separation, presence becomes more than just a virtue. It becomes a form of communication. When someone leaves when he moves on and seems completely unaffected, the temptation is to fight for his attention, to post more online, to send another text, to do something, anything to prove your value. But the most potent signal you can ever send is not a cry for recognition. It is the silent transmission of your energy that simply says, I am here, I am whole, and I am not waiting to be chosen. And this kind of presence is cultivated, not performed. And it begins with something as simple as the way you breathe. Shallow, hurried breaths signal fear to your nervous system. Deep, grounded breathing signals calm. When your breath deepens, your nervous system shifts out of fight or flight and into a state of rest and recovery. From that space, your body is no longer contracted around the pain of the past. It expands into the present moment. And in that expansion, you begin to radiate something that is truly unmistakable. Picture this. A woman named Ava is walking through a bookstore. She's not dressed to impress anyone. She carries no sense of trying to be seen. And yet people notice her. Why? Not because she's demanding attention, but because she is fully alive in her own body. She lingers over book titles with genuine curiosity. She moves with a quiet intention. She holds her head not with arrogance, but with a sense of ease. There is nothing loud about her, but everything about her energy says, I am present. Presence like this cannot be faked. It arises when we stop outsourcing our sense of self to someone else's opinion of us. And the beautiful irony is the more you stop needing to be noticed, the more magnetic you naturally become. Because people aren't just responding to how you look. They are responding to your frequency. And your frequency is shaped by your inner posture. Not the posture of your shoulders, but the posture of your self-regard. This is the secret that many people miss. When you carry an energy of longing or desperation, it leaks out. Your words might be calm and composed, but emotional tension has a scent that people can feel. But when you are grounded in who you are, when you no longer crave validation. From the one who walked away, your energy becomes clean, clear, and centered. And that kind of energy is rare. It is felt. And it is remembered. There's a reason why people find themselves thinking about an ex long after a breakup. It's not because that person was perfect or the relationship was ideal. It's because after all the noise died down and the silence settled in, they could still feel something. Not neediness, not bitterness, but stillness. And it unsettles them because most people are not used to that kind of profound presence. So let's explore the mechanics of this. From a physiological standpoint, presence is the product of integration. It's your mind, your body, and your breath all aligned in the exact same moment. When you are truly present, your thoughts aren't racing ahead to the future or stuck replaying the past. Your attention isn't scattered in a million directions. Your posture isn't collapsed in defeat. Your energy isn't anxious. Instead, you are alert yet completely relaxed. You are soft, but you are also strong. Practices like Qigong Tai Chi or even just mindful walking can help you cultivate this state. So, can simple daily rituals, lighting a candle with your full awareness, preparing a cup of tea with a sense of reverence, looking into the eyes of a friend or even a stranger with no agenda other than to simply connect. These small acts, when done with presence, carry an immense weight. And when this level of awareness becomes your natural default state, your mere existence becomes an act of influence. Presence also completely disrupts the narrative of absence. Often after a breakup, we feel this compulsion to remind the other person of what they lost. We want them to see us thriving, smiling, glowing up. But true presence doesn't care about performance. It trusts that what is real will always echo. That energy, not words, is what truly lingers, and your energy will never lie. Let's reflect on a short story. A man named Noah had ended a long-term relationship with a woman named Isabella. She was heartbroken, but she never once reached out to him in desperation. Instead, she took long walks in nature. She practiced moments of silence. She returned to her passion for painting. Months passed. One afternoon, Noah stumbled upon a recent photograph of her posted by a mutual friend. She wasn't posing for the camera. She was laughing, completely unaware that she was being photographed. And in that moment, something shifted in him. He couldn't stop looking at that image. There was something different about her. Not in how she looked, but in how she felt. She seemed fuller, more rooted, unreachable, yet at the same time completely real. That is the result of presence. It makes people see you in a new light. Even the people who thought they knew you completely. Even the ones who left. And still, the goal of presence is not about being seen. It is about being, fully, without any embellishment or disguise. In relationships, this quality creates the space for truth to finally emerge. When you are present, you stop playing roles. You no longer manipulate or contort yourself to try and earn love. You become a safe space not just for others, but for your own soul to finally land. And when someone returns, and they often do, it is not because you lured them back with clever tactics. It is because they felt your absence not as an empty void, but as a presence so deep it was impossible to forget. And that feeling, the memory of your steadiness, your calm, your self-contained energy begins to haunt them. Not because you tried to be unforgettable, but because you became undeniable. In psychology, presence is linked with the concept of attunement. Attunement is the ability to tune in to another person's emotional state with empathy and awareness. When two people are attuned, they feel safe, seen, and soothed. But here is the paradox: to be truly attuned to another person, you must first be attuned to yourself. You cannot offer someone else the very presence that you lack within. This is why healing from the inside out is not a luxury. It is the absolute foundation of every meaningful relationship you will ever have in your life. When you start to attune to yourself, to your body, your breath, your feelings, you begin to reclaim all the parts of yourself that you once scattered. The part of you that needed permission to feel your emotions. The part that longed for someone else's approval. The part that waited for another person to tell you what you were worth. You begin to gather these parts like scattered seeds, and you bring them home to the present moment. This is the silent revolution of selfhood. Even when you're alone, presence brings a sense of companionship. The mind grows quiet, the heart softens. And the old stories we've told ourselves that we are unworthy, unloved, or unwanted begin to dissolve. They are replaced by something much older and truer. The deep knowing that you are not broken, that your essence is completely untouched by rejection, that your value is not dependent on whether someone comes back to you. And in this space, you become free. Not free from love, but free from being attached to what you think love must look like. You no longer need someone to return in order to feel complete. But if they do return, they will find a version of you they never knew. A version who no longer waits, who no longer pleads, who no longer performs. This presence doesn't beg for attention. It beckons. It doesn't grasp. It grounds. And in a world that is completely addicted to noise, it is your silence that becomes magnetic. So ask yourself gently, when I walk into a room, what energy follows me? When I sit with someone I care about, am I really there, or is my mind somewhere else rehearsing, reacting, replaying the past? When I think of the one who left, am I rooted in what is, or am I lost in what was? Presence cannot be faked. It must be cultivated through your breath, through awareness, through radical honesty with yourself, through the practice of stillness, even when the world around you is swirling in chaos. And here's the most profound part. When you become truly present, you also become more available for real love. Not the kind that clings, but the kind that flows freely. You are no longer searching for someone to complete your story. You are inviting them to join you in it, as an equal, as a mirror, as a fellow traveler, not as a savior. And in this kind of energy, real healthy relationships thrive. Because presence doesn't manipulate, it doesn't distort, it doesn't hide, it simply is. And what is real will always recognize itself. In this way, presence becomes your superpower, a quiet, unwavering force that doesn't scream, but speaks directly to the soul. And even if he is with someone else, even if he believes he has completely moved on, he will feel it. Not as a reminder of the past, but as a whisper from the present. A whisper that says, she is not waiting, she is becoming. And that is a presence no man ever forgets. Let's explore now one of the most misunderstood yet transformative forces in the human experience, detachment. This is not to be confused with indifference or coldness or emotionally shutting down. Detachment in its truest and purest form is an act of profound inner maturity. It is the ability to love someone fully without clinging to them, to give freely without demanding anything in return, to walk away without resentment when staying would mean compromising your own peace. It is the practice of holding space for what you value without gripping it so tightly that you suffocate the very thing you're trying to keep. In relationships, detachment is what allows a woman to remain sovereign. It is what keeps her grounded in her own self-respect, even in the face of heartbreak, betrayal, or silence. And this is where so many of us get confused. We think that to get someone back, especially a man who has left and seemingly replaced us, we have to do something. We have to push, initiate contact, and constantly remind him of our worth. But real magnetism doesn't come from pursuit. It comes from release. There is a quiet but radiant strength in the woman who does not chase. The woman who knows deep in her bones, if it is mine, it will return to me, and if it does not, then it was never truly aligned with who I am becoming. This isn't arrogance. This is clarity. And clarity is what separates the free woman from the frantic one. We often mistake detachment for an emotional void. But in Eastern philosophy, particularly in the teachings of Taoism and Zen Buddhism, detachment is the very essence of inner freedom. Lao Tzu wrote, "By letting it go, it all gets done." When you release your grip not just on people, but on specific outcomes, you begin to flow with life, instead of constantly fighting against it. And life has a funny way of restoring balance in its own time. In psychology, this concept parallels what is known as secure attachment. A securely attached person doesn't avoid connection, but they also don't live in constant fear of abandonment. They can remain present and engaged in their relationships, but they are also rooted in the deep knowing that their identity is not dependent on someone else's approval. This psychological balance is what allows you to remain composed when a man leaves. It's what allows you to grieve the loss without groveling for him, to come back to process your pain without punishing yourself. Detachment also unlocks one of the most underestimated powers in relationships: unpredictability. I don't mean this in a manipulative or chaotic way, but in a deeply organic sense. When you are no longer governed by your attachment to someone, you become unpredictable. Not because you're playing games, but because your energy is no longer enslaved by your reactions to them. You respond from a place of presence, not from a place of pain. You respond from choice, not from compulsion. And this quality, this emotional sovereignty, is what makes a man pause, even if he's with someone else, especially if that new person is clinging, demanding, and constantly seeking reassurance. Because energy speaks so much louder than words, and a man, even on an unconscious level, can sense the profound difference between a woman who needs him to feel whole and a woman who is already whole, whether he stays or goes. Let's take a real-world example. A woman named Elise was in a long relationship that ended abruptly. Her partner James moved on quickly, starting a new relationship that looked vibrant and happy on the surface. Elise was heartbroken and was tempted to compete. She thought about posting curated photos, sending texts to remind him of the good times they shared. But something inside her shifted. Instead of reacting, she chose to retreat into herself. Not to isolate herself, but to recalibrate her entire system. She started meditating in the early mornings. She journaled every single day without censoring herself. She walked through her emotions instead of trying to go around them. And most importantly, she began to release her grip on the story that James's love was the ultimate proof of her value. She practiced detachment, not to forget him, but to remember herself. Months later, James reached out. It wasn't with a big declaration of love, but with a quiet confusion. "There's something I can't explain," he said. "It's like I can still feel you, but not in a way that pulls me down. It's in a way that makes me question why I ever left." That is the paradox. The energy of detachment doesn't repel people. It attracts them, but it attracts them without force, without fear, and without friction. When you detach, you stop trying to control what was never yours to control in the first place. You stop living your life in reaction to someone else's behavior, and you begin to shape your own life from the inside out. This shift has a physiological component too. When your nervous system is dysregulated, when you are anxious, desperate, or obsessively thinking about someone, it activates your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response. You are not in your body. You are not in your breath. You are completely lost in the chase. But when you choose detachment, you anchor your awareness back into the parasympathetic state. Your breath slows down, your heartbeat steadies. You can feel your feet on the ground again. And from this place of embodied presence, you can access a wisdom that can never be found in overthinking. You begin to hear the voice underneath all the noise, the one that whispers to you, "You are already enough." There is an old Zen saying, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." Detachment is the art of letting go of what you think needs to happen for you to be happy. It is trusting that life sees the whole picture, even when you can only see a tiny, painful fragment. And this trust changes everything. It changes the way you move, the way you speak, the way you sit in silence with yourself. One of the most transformational things a woman can do after being left is not to strategize about how to get him back, but to investigate what it was inside of her that was holding on so tightly. What was the belief that made her think that love had to hurt in order to be real? What was the story that told her she was only worthy if he chose her again? When she confronts these inner patterns not with shame but with radical honesty, she reclaims the power that she once gave away. She stops waiting for an apology that may never come. She stops checking his social media updates, analyzing his every move, and comparing herself to the new woman in his life. She simply breathes. She simply lives. And in that quiet, simple aliveness, she becomes more magnetic than she ever was before. This isn't about revenge. It's about release. It's not about making him regret leaving. It's about you remembering who you were before you thought you needed him to feel whole. And who you are now, having walked through the fire of this loss and chosen to love yourself even more, not less. And if he ever turns around, what he will encounter is not the same woman he left. He will find someone who is not waiting for him to return. He will find someone who is not available in the same desperate way, not because she has closed her heart, but because she has become whole on her own. And that wholeness changes the entire conversation. It changes the energy. It changes the ending. There's a quiet power in knowing that you can love someone and still let them go. That you can cherish your past without being imprisoned by it. That you can grieve deeply and fully and still refuse to cling. This is detachment. It is not cold. It is not cruel. It is clear. And when a man feels that clarity, when he senses that you no longer need him to validate your worth, it disrupts his whole world. It makes him question the choices he made. Not because you demanded it, but because you demonstrated something he had likely never seen before: true emotional freedom. And that is rare. That is unforgettable. You become the woman whose energy heals rather than hooks. The one who does not beg, but who blesses. Not with grand gestures, but with a graceful distance. Not with accusations, but with a silence that speaks of your inner peace. And that silence will echo louder than any words you could ever say. To detach is to trust that your destiny is not held hostage by one man's decision. It is to believe that what is truly for you can never be taken away, and what is not for you will fall away no matter how tightly you try to hold on. It is to walk through life with open hands rather than clenched fists. And this posture, this emotional openness paired with a deep self-containment, is what eventually brings everything back into balance. In time, in truth, and in alignment. The woman who detaches is not the woman who no longer feels. She is the woman who feels everything, but no longer allows those feelings to dictate her direction. She has cried the tears. She has mourned the loss. And now she sits at the edge of a new beginning, not waiting, not forcing, simply becoming. And in that becoming, she becomes the very thing she was once looking for in someone else. A sanctuary, a storm, a stillness. A woman who no longer chases because she is already home. Let us return now to the truth that has guided every step of this journey, that no external force, not even love, lost, not even a man who has chosen someone else, can define the essence of who you are. You may have started this path with a question, a longing, a pain, a need to understand why someone walked away and if there was a way to bring him back. But along the way, I hope you discovered something far more powerful than any strategy to win back love. I hope you discovered yourself, the quiet strength of your stillness, the depth of your presence, the discipline of your emotional self-mastery, the clarity that emerges when you stop reacting and start observing, when you stop grasping and start growing, when you stop trying to be chosen and instead finally choose yourself. In relationships, we often try so hard to change other people, to fix the past, or to predict the future. But real power, that soul-deep, unshakable power, comes when you realize that your greatest influence is not in what you say or do to someone else, but in how you evolve within your own being. When you reclaim your breath, your nervous system settles. When you straighten your posture, your mind follows. When you become deeply present, your entire energy changes. And that energy, grounded whole and undemanding, is what speaks volumes. It is what lingers in the heart of a man long after your words have faded. It is what makes him remember, and in some cases it is what makes him return. But the miracle is not in his return. The miracle is in your return to yourself. So if you want to know the path that makes a man truly see you, even if he's with someone else, it is this: stop chasing and start breathing. Stop seeking and start seeing. Stop waiting for someone to call you worthy, and begin living like you already are. The woman who learns to stand in silence, to walk in peace, to love without attachment, and to let go with grace, that woman does not need to ask anyone to come back. Her very being becomes an invitation not only for others to enter her life, but for life itself to meet her in all of her fullness. And if he returns, he will not return to the same woman he left. He will return to a sanctuary, a force, a woman who no longer needs him, but who may choose him freely if he is truly ready. And if he does not return, it will no longer matter in the way it once did, because you will have already returned home to yourself. That is the highest reunion. That is the most powerful love story. And it begins not when he comes back, but when you finally do.